Yo, what's going on, Geminites, aka Gem Knights, aka Gem Nation? It's your boy Gem Mint. I'm back with another recent reads. I just got done reading Alan Moore's Promethea, the Absolute editions. I was scrolling through the library trying to figure out what I wanted to read next. And I always see these weird looking white and gold absolutes. I kind of have a little idea of what Prometheus is about. But I'm like, I'm never going to read these books. So boom, let's just knock it out right now. I was pleasantly surprised, and it was quite an experience reading this book, man. Stay tuned. I'm going to do a review. We're going to get into detail about the books themselves, about the story, and all that good stuff. So check me out. Alright, first of all, Prometheus is written by Alan Moore. You guys know him from The Killing Joke. You know him from V for Vendetta, for Watchmen. So I'm already thinking, it's got to be good. Alan Moore is a great writer. All those stories were written really well. It's got art by J.H. Williams III, who's fucking incredible. And it was published under Alan Moore's America's Best Comics imprint, which was a division or a subsidiary or whatever of Jim Lee's Wildstorm while it was still under Image. I believe when DC purchased Image is when I think DC put these out. It doesn't say DC anywhere on it, but they're Absolute editions, which is DC's format. Anyway, I ended up getting these Absolutes when I was collecting every Absolute. Volume 1 was always a whale. It was hard to find. And somebody was selling all three for cover price on the Omnibus Facebook group. So I just snatched them all up. And I finally took a crack at them, man. If you look at the outside of the slipcase, they're pretty plain. They're just gold art of Promethea with these little weird designs, looking like tarot cards or something like that. Which actually, once you read the story and you understand what that represents, it makes the slipcases fucking epic. The actual hardcovers themselves, you get to see Williams' artwork takes advantage of the full page, man. I mean, you could even see all these covers are wraparound covers. The artwork's great. There's so much intricate details going on inside of it. Basically, every page, it's not just comic book panels. Every page is basically a 2-page spread. All the panels usually have some kind of graphics or artwork or some intricate designs that surround the panel. So every time you flip, like, I had to really kind of like take in the whole 2 pages and kind of figure out where I need to start reading before I even started, because they played around with a lot of different styles of paneling. Some you read clockwise. There's one where Promethea is walking through an infinite loop, and you have to kind of follow her and her friend along the loop. So that's really crazy. The cover price for these books, they were $100 each. You could pick these up in trade paperbacks on InStockTrades.com if you guys want to read this after here. I'm going to try to kind of go spoiler free, but even if you get a little spoilage, it's still worth reading in my opinion. So let's get this thing started. Let's talk about what Promethea is about, who Promethea is. This book is kind of like Planetary mixed with Sandman. Promethea is like an Amazon type superhero, but not so much a superhero and not just one person. Promethea is a story, it's an idea, it's a creation that creators throughout time can invoke and become Promethea while still being themselves. As Promethea, they have Wonder Woman type powers, and you kind of think that this is going to be a superhero book in the first 11 issues. It deals with who Promethea is. We learn that she's from 499 AD, and it's a little girl named Promethea, and her father is basically pushing her out of the back of the house. My bad, it's 411 AD. Pushing her out of the back of the house. Somebody's out to get him. She's saying, I'm going out to the desert. I'm going to be killed. And he says something along the lines of, death will get you or the gods will get you, or something along those lines. But he basically immortalizes her in story, that her story gets passed down through generations. Then we come to current time. So this book was written through 1999 and 2005, and you're in real time in the book. You're in New York. You're 1999 when you start. But New York doesn't look like New York. It's like a futuristic New York. It's almost like Marvel's 2099, but in the year 1999. Police are flying around in flying saucers. There's flying cars looking like the Fifth Element. There are superheroes in this world, and Moore kind of does like what he did with the Watchmen. They're not superheroes that we know. You have the Five Swell Guys is a superhero team, which is like the Fantastic Four kind of. But their powers vary. You have one that's a psychic, one that's a genius, one that's the strong guy, or whatever. But they play a very small role. They're just there to flesh out New York for us. Then you even have another city called Millennia that has its own superheroes that are the ABC heroes, America's Best Comics heroes, which are like Troy Strongman and shit like that, which is kind of like the Metropolis and the Superman. But anyway, none of that stuff even matters. So we get our main character. Her name is Sophie Bangs. She's a college student and has a friend named Stacia. So Sophie is writing this term paper on Promethea. She started researching it. Throughout the years, there have been, famous comic book artists that have drawn Promethea. In the past, whatever, directors, creators, writers, what have you. And she starts looking into Promethea, basically goes to interview the last writer of Promethea, who we learn was the last Promethea, right? Her name is Barbara. Barbara is older, a little overweight. Her husband passed away. Her husband's name is Steve. But she basically doesn't want to do an interview. Sophia gets attacked by a Smee, which is like a shadow monster, and basically invokes Promethea and becomes Promethea. So that's the beginning. So, it's like typical comic book stuff. It's pretty cool. She learns through Barbara who Promethea is, and that's how we all learn who she is. And then, we learn that basically she's going to be the new Promethea. So then we start getting introduced into our villains. Like, you have the Temple, who is historically always out to get Promethea. You have this demon type of character who his earthly concubines don't even see who he's talking to, but he's got a room full of demons and ghosts and spirits and things like that. So you kind of think that's where they're going to go with this book. And it kind of feels like a little predictable. Okay, this is what they're going to do. Prometheus is going to fight this guy. No, shit does not go that way at all. What we learn from Promethea is a story. She's an idea. You invoke Promethea, right? She lives in the immateria world. So we're in the material world. This is the immateria, which is also basically the dreamscape. It's basically the afterlife. It's heaven and hell. It's the imagination. So as Promethea starts learning about the immaterial world, she starts doing a little bit more digging and researching about what that really means. Now you have her friend Stacia is tagging along with her, and she's kind of like shitty to her, and like Sophia's mother is kind of shitty to her. She's like a whore. She's an alcoholic. So everyone's kind of always dogs out Sophia. So I guess that's why it intrigued her to become Promethea, to be this strong, beautiful, powerful person. What's funny? In these books, they don't call them superheroes. They're science heroes. Science villains, science heroes. I guess because Marvel and DC own the trademark, that's why they went with that. So anyway, as Sophia's doing more research on Promethea in the library, this old creepy guy kind of runs up on her and like puts his hand on her hand and kind of zones her out a little bit. And you think that he's just some creepy like piece of shit. But we learn later that he's a magician named Jack Faust, who really teaches her how to, he teaches her all about the immaterial world, everything there is to know about magic and all that kind of stuff. So I'm reading through the book. The art is really good. It has a pretty cool storyline. You're thinking it's a little bit predictable. And then what happens is, I think it's around issue 11, so Sophie wants to know more about magic, and Jack Faust is like, sure, I'll teach you everything there is to know if I could have sex with Promethea. And you're thinking like, ain't no way she's gonna do it, but she does it, man. She's like, it ain't my body anyway, whatever. And during that sequence, he's basically teaching her everything there is to know about reality and how things work and creation and afterlife and everything, right? So it ends up being like, yeah, he's a little bit sleazy, but he still came through on his end of the bargain and gives her some books to read and tells her to consult the snakes on her staff if she wants to know more. So that's when we get to issue 12, the last issue of the first Absolute, where basically she's researched everything she needs to know. She consults her snakes, and this is where at first I thought they kind of lost me. Issue 12 is like a very long, wordy issue of her snakes, Mike and Mac, explaining to her everything creation, how reality, the history of man, history of mankind, of Earth, solar system, planets, and all through the path of the tarot cards. So that tarot cards plays a big role. Now, this is where I guess Alan Moore uses his own theories and influence and writes about it. But I'm cool with that, man. It makes for a good story. But the two snakes talk in rhyming sequences for the whole time. And at this point, I go on the Omnibus Facebook group and I'm like, man, I'm reading Promethea. It's a chore. Like, man, this long, wordy fucking thing. But, I'm talking to some people on the board and I'm like, you know what, man? You got to respect the fact that he's able to break down all of reality in rhyming format using tarot cards in an issue of a comic book. Everyone's kind of like on the board saying, oh, man, I know it's kind of rough. Book 2 is the slowest one, and it's going to read like a textbook. So I'm like, damn, here I go. I'm in for it. Man, when I started reading book 2, I couldn't put it down. It really blew my mind. It really got me hooked. In book 2, Sophia's like, look, man, I know everything there is to know about the immaterial world. The only thing I got to do now is go explore for myself. At this point, we already know there's multiple Prometheas. Barbara was the previous Promethea. All those other writers and creators throughout time are still Promethea in the immaterial world, kind of looking down on everything. Barbara decides to leave the material world, go find her husband Steve, and our characters Sophie and Stacia, they go follow her. They follow her into the immaterial world. They basically are dead. They're in the afterlife, and that's where shit gets broken down and is visually and mentally like exhilarating, man. Like, we learn, I think there's 7 spheres of the afterlife, which are also based on tarot cards. You see them go through all these different, I want to say like the 7 levels of hell, but it's not hell. Nothing's really bad. It's just these different planes are different planes of emotion. Really quite an experience, man. Especially, when they break down like living in the material world and ascending up these spheres. You're the serpent. You're going up the staff, right? And they eventually go to the top, which is basically God. And you learn that everyone is God. Once you die and ascend to the highest level, you are God. Everything is God. God is one. Nothing to something. Dark to light. It's like really mind-blowing, man. And a lot of the theories in here is kind of like my personal beliefs too, man. So at this point, at the highest level of ascension, Barbara finds her husband Steve. And they're like, listen, we can fuse with this sphere, with this, I think it's called the God's Head. And we can just be, and we can be everything, or we can descend back down. You rise up as the serpent, you ascend down as a dove, and we can go on another adventure and basically be reborn into new lives, kind of like reincarnation. So they're standing at the top of all reality. They decide to do it. Let's go live again. We could just be content, or we can start a new life. And they all jump off, all 3 of them with Promethea. Promethea just flies down like regular, but they turn into actual doves, like spiritual doves, and you see them go fly into this hospital, and you see a lady giving birth, and the doctor says, yep, it's twins, just like we thought. And basically Barbara and Steve become the souls for these babies that are born. Shit's crazy, man. It's like really deep. A lot of moments reading this book, I was like out loud, like, damn, that was some real shit, man. I really like that. I kind of went just to the end. I think book 2 is really a strong book for this series, man. And the artwork is crazy. The explanation of everything, like they explain the Big Bang, and it's all sex, and it's really like the climax. And they explain that time, that there is no time. Everything is happening, has happened, and is happening now. It's like crazy, man. Like the Big Bang is happening now. Death is happening now. Life is like, it's really out there, man. And it's a smart read. I mean, I'm not the most intellectual dude, but I was with it, man. Made sense to me. Basically, when I was talking about these slipcases and the artwork, that's what the highest plane looks like. That's what God looks like. So it's really, you really respect the slipcase covers a lot more after reading it, because they look like they are boring beforehand. Anyway, so the third and final book deals with Promethea's now back down from the immaterial world. She's a material girl now. And, while she went with Barb to go find Barbara, she let her girl, Stacia, merge with Grace, one of the other Prometheas, to hold it down as Promethea on Earth while she was gone. Well, the power got to their heads. They became infatuated with each other, and they started... And then, they wanted to beef with Sophie when she gets back. So the third book has a lot to do with a trial in the Immateria on who's the rightful Promethea. And it's funny. It's almost like our boy Jack Frost is actually the lawyer for our Promethea. Promethea, at the end of the day, it's that cliche of split it in half and you both could be Promethea. And Sophie is like, no, give it to her. If it's got to be somebody, it has to be one. Promethea can't be split. And it's like, only the real Promethea would say that. You're the one. So, you know what I mean? Whatever. And then it ties back to Promethea's villains, right? The temple and all these people that were out to destroy Promethea because she is the bringer of the apocalypse and she's the cause for the end of the world. She really is, in like a Hellboy kind of sense. So we find out that at this point she is like an enlightened Promethea Prime. Everyone's trying to stop her, but she's like fulfilling her task. She knows that she needs to end the world. And you know what happens here? I didn't mention in the beginning, but when she first learns about the immaterial world, it's funny. They're walking through it, and they become from comic book characters to paintings to real people. And for one of those issues, he uses actual pictures and incorporates that into the art, and it's realistic, like photorealistic. So that was a really cool touch. I didn't really mention the earthly villain, the doll, the painted doll character, which is almost like a Joker. It doesn't really play a big role, to be honest, though. There was another really powerful scene. Like I mentioned, this was in book 2. I mentioned that Sophie's mother treats her like shit. She's an alcoholic. She's a whore. And we find out it's because her man left her when she was pregnant, right? Sophie's dad. But we meet him in the afterlife, and he's like, yo... I was a coke dealer. I didn't want your mother to know. When I found out she was pregnant with you, I told my partners that I'm out of the game. I need to raise you and do right by her. So they killed him. But Trixie, Sophie's mother, never knew that. She thought he just ran off. He reconciles with Sophie. When Sophie comes back to Earth, she explains to her mother what happened. She says he has a tattoo on his arm, an earring in his ear. This is what happened. And basically, they have a reconciliation moment. I almost had an emotional breakdown. And it was just really powerful stuff, man. Anyway, so at the end of the day, this might get a little spoilery. I mean, if I sold you by now and you're like, yo, fuck this video, I'm going to go get the trade paperbacks, maybe... You want to cut out now and check back later. But basically, she does end the world, but not in the sense of fire and explosion and destruction. And I might be a little off here because a lot of this might be up to interpretation or it might just be too smart for me. But basically, she gives the world the knowledge of the immateria and the afterlife, and the earth is a different place after the Armageddon. And that people can talk with their loved ones that have passed and can kind of go back and forth through the immateria, and just makes for an overall better quality of living, I guess you could say. The last issue is really crazy. I mean, they actually give it to you on this huge poster as well, front and back. And it doesn't really have anything to do with the story. It's just more almost like your boy Alan Moore did his homework on this, man. Research and these concepts and ideas and consciousness and where they come from, and citing his work almost. And it was pretty deep, man. I didn't really care for it as much. I was more into the story aspect, but he breaks down where his theories are coming from and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of little things that I left out, but that's kind of like the main gist of it. There's little stuff in the real world that's going on, but see, when I was reading it, the scope of the immateria stuff, I didn't even care what was going on in the real world. You have a mayor that has multiple personalities, and Kind of like how I think The Dark Knight and like Spawn, at the end of every couple of issues, you get like a wrap up of what's going on in the world through the news. This one is from Texture. Hey, this is Texture. It's almost like Starship Troopers. Do you want to know more? And they kind of are just telling you what's going on. I don't know why he ended up going with that futuristic New York. I thought that was going to play a part later on in the story, but it really didn't. And I don't know why. It's almost like good that I read Planetary before this, because it almost seems like an extension of a lot of those concepts and ideas. And Promethea may have came out first even. But anyway, if you read this story, drop me some comments. What did I leave? Did I leave anything out important? Did you agree with some of the stuff? What were your thoughts on it? If you haven't read it, I'm always curious to know, did it make you want to pick it up? I wouldn't really recommend hunting down the first Absolute if it's still a whale, very expensive. But there's trade paperbacks on IST, man. They're inexpensive. You can read the story. But I definitely enjoyed it. It's funny. I had to go back on the forums after reading, like, the second Absolute. I'm like, I was wrong. Prometheus fucking blowing my mind right now. It's dope as fuck. So I take it back. It wasn't a chore. It kind of just felt like it was being predictable. And then you had this very weird issue. And then it just went batshit crazy from there. But I definitely enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts. Hit the like. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more recent reads. We're actually going to start knocking through these Valiant Deluxe editions. And me and Manimal are still going to read other stuff in between, so it's not just Valiant. So we're going to read those deluxe editions. I don't know what else I'm going to read. I kind of want to read these Batman Nightfall omnibus, man, but that's going to be a big undertaking as well. Anyway, thanks for checking it out. Stay minty fresh, y'all. Peace.